The observation deck of the Terran diplomatic vessel, Harmony's voice hummed with quiet tension as Ambassador Sarah Chen reviewed the briefing materials one final time. After 3 years of careful negotiations, humanity was finally being granted an audience with the collective consciousness, the galaxy's most powerful and oldest civilization. According to every piece of intelligence Earth had gathered, the collective had maintained galactic peace for over 50,000 years through a simple philosophy: absolute emotional suppression. Dr. Marcus Webb, the mission's chief xenopsychologist, paced nervously near the viewport, watching the massive collective station grow larger as they approached. "You know," he muttered, adjusting his glasses for the 10th time in as many minutes, "every species that's joined the collective has had to undergo the purification. Complete removal of emotional capacity. They consider feelings to be an evolutionary dead end, a weakness that prevents true rational thought." Captain James Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing from his position near the door, finally spoke up. "And they think we're going to volunteer for this?" His tone carried a mixture of disbelief and irritation that made several heads turn. Sarah closed her datapad and met his gaze steadily. "They think we'll see reason once they explain the benefits. Longer lifespans, perfect logical decision-making, no conflicts driven by anger or jealousy or fear. On paper, it sounds almost utopian." "On paper," Lieutenant Commander Ashley Park added from her station, "a lot of terrible ideas sound good." The young tactical officer had been unusually quiet during the journey, but her fingers drummed an anxious rhythm on her console. A tell, Sarah knew, that Ashley was running combat scenarios in her head, just in case. The communications panel chimed, and Ensign David Kamar's boyish face lit up with what looked like relief at having something concrete to do. "Ambassador, we're being hailed by the collective station. They're ready to receive us." Sarah smoothed down her formal diplomatic jacket, a navy blue affair with gold trim that made her feel like she was wearing a costume. "Well, team, let's go meet the galaxy's oldest civilization and try not to start an interstellar incident." "No promises," muttered Chief Engineer Maria Gonzalez from the back of the room, earning a few nervous chuckles. The docking procedure was flawless, almost unnervingly so. The collective station, a structure that dwarfed Earth's largest space habitats, guided the Harmony's voice into its berth with precision that spoke of technology so advanced it might as well be magic. As the diplomatic team gathered at the airlock, Sarah could feel the weight of what they were about to face. This wasn't just first contact. This was humanity making its case for why it should be allowed to remain, well, human. The airlock opened to reveal a corridor of crystalline material that seemed to glow, with its own internal light. Standing in perfect formation were 7 figures, humanoid in basic shape but distinctly alien in every other way. They wore robes of a color Sarah's brain couldn't quite process, something that shifted between silver and gold, and colors that didn't exist in Earth's spectrum. Their faces were smooth, almost featureless, with large dark eyes that showed no hint of emotion whatsoever. The central figure stepped forward with movements that were precise and economical. "Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth." Its voice was melodious but completely flat, devoid of any inflection or feeling. "I am Designated Coordinator Prime 7. We welcome you to Enlightenment Station. Please follow." No pleasantries, no small talk, just straight to business. Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Marcus, who gave a tiny shrug that said, "I told you so," as clearly as words could. They were led through corridors that seemed to stretch impossibly far, passing dozens of different species, all going about their business with the same eerie calm. No one hurried, no one dawdled, everyone moved with perfect efficiency. It was like watching an extremely well-programmed simulation of organic life. "This is creepy as hell," Ashley whispered to Captain Rodriguez, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Finally, they reached a massive chamber that appeared to be carved from a single enormous crystal. At the far end sat what could only be described as a council, though collective might have been more accurate. 15 beings of different species, all wearing the same emotionless expressions, all perfectly still, except for their eyes tracking the human delegation's approach. Coordinator Prime 7 gestured for them to stop at a designated spot and then took its place among the council. The being in the center, slightly larger than the others and wearing additional markings that suggested rank, spoke in that same unsettling monotone. I am Consensus Leader 1. You stand before the unified collective consciousness of enlightened species. We have studied your kind, humanity, with great interest and significant concern. Sarah stepped forward, forcing herself to maintain diplomatic protocols even though every instinct screamed that something was deeply wrong about this place. Consensus Leader, on behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I thank you for granting us this audience. We come seeking peaceful relations and mutual understanding. Understanding, Consensus Leader 1 repeated, as if testing the word. Yes, we understand you quite well, Ambassador Chen. That is precisely the nature of our concern. Humanity exhibits dangerous levels of emotional volatility. Your species experiences rage, fear, joy, sorrow, and countless other feeling states that cloud rational judgment. This makes you unpredictable. Unpredictability threatens galactic stability. Marcus stepped up beside Sarah, his academic curiosity apparently overriding his nervousness. With respect, Consensus Leader, emotions are not simply obstacles to overcome. They're fundamental to human cognition. Our emotional responses inform our decision-making, drive our creativity, and enable our capacity for empathy and cooperation. Incorrect, another council member stated flatly. A being with 6 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. Emotions are evolutionary remnants from primitive survival states. They cause conflicts, wars, and inefficient resource allocation. We've observed 47 species undergo the purification. In every case, post-purification societies showed marked improvement in productivity, lifespan, and social stability. Crime rates approached 0, wars became obsolete, suffering was eliminated. Suffering was eliminated, Captain Rodriguez repeated, his military bearing making his skepticism cut like a knife. Or the ability to recognize suffering was eliminated. The council turned their collective gaze on him, and Sarah felt a chill despite the comfortable temperature. These beings didn't show irritation or offense because they couldn't, but something in that unified stare felt profoundly threatening. An interesting distinction, Consensus Leader 1 said after a pause that felt calculated, but ultimately irrelevant. We offer humanity a choice, though in truth, it is not truly a choice. You may undergo voluntary purification and join the collective, gaining access to our technology, our knowledge, and our protection. Or you may refuse, in which case your species will be quarantined. You will be restricted to your current territory, forbidden from expanding or contacting other species. You will exist in isolation until such time as you evolve beyond your emotional limitations naturally, or you destroy yourselves attempting. The chamber fell silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Quarantine meant the end of humanity's dreams of exploring the galaxy, of taking its place among the stars. It meant stagnation, possibly for millennia, but purification meant giving up the very thing that made them human. How long do we have to decide? She asked, keeping her voice level despite the fury building in her chest. We require your answer within 1 standard rotation of your homeworld. 24 of your hours. Consensus Leader. 1 tilted its head in what might have been meant as a gesture of understanding but came across as mechanical. We recognize this is difficult for emotional beings. Use this time to consult with your government, your people, but understand that the decision is binary. Join us or face isolation. There is no third option. Before Sarah could respond, Ashley Park did something that would be talked about in diplomatic circles for decades to come. She laughed, not a polite chuckle or a nervous giggle, but a full, genuine laugh that echoed through the crystal chamber. Every being on the council turned to stare at her with those dark, emotionless eyes. Ashley, to her credit, didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, still chuckling. I'm sorry, she said, wiping her eyes. But did you just threaten to quarantine humanity? Us? Did you actually research us at all, or did you just skim the highlights? Lieutenant Commander, Sarah began, but Ashley was on a roll. No, seriously, I need to know, because if you'd done even basic research on human military history, you'd know that telling us we can't do something is literally the fastest way to make us do it. We're the species that looked at the sky and said, "I want to go there," before we'd even invented proper metalworking. We're the species that split the atom and then immediately wondered if we could use it to power spaceships. We're the species that has a documented history of starting wars over tea, spices, and who gets to draw lines on maps. Marcus had gone pale, but Sarah noticed Captain Rodriguez was trying very hard not to smile. Maria Gonzalez had given up entirely and was openly grinning. Consensus leader. One's expression didn't change because it couldn't, but its voice took on a quality that might have been confused for patience in a being capable of such things. Your emotional outburst proves our point precisely, Lieutenant Commander Park. Irrational behavior driven by feeling rather than logic. You are experiencing anger at perceived threat, causing you to respond with hostility rather than reasoned discourse. "Oh, I'm not angry yet," Ashley replied, her smile sharp as broken glass. "But since you brought it up, let's talk about anger. You think emotions make us weak. You think they cloud our judgment and make us unpredictable. You're absolutely right about the unpredictable part. But weak?" She shook her head. "That's where you made your mistake." David Kumar pulled up a holographic display from his portable unit, his fingers flying across the interface with surprising confidence for someone who'd been quiet this whole time. "Ambassador, permission to present some comparative data." Sarah, deciding the diplomatic protocol had already been thoroughly violated, nodded. "Granted. Let's educate them." The hologram expanded to show a three-dimensional chart. This is a comparison of military conflicts across known species over the last 10,000 years. The collective maintains records on all of this, so feel free to verify. David pointed to various data points. The average duration of warfare for most species before achieving stable peace, approximately 800 to 1,200 years of their planetary history. Humanity's record? He highlighted a section that made several council members lean forward slightly. "We've been engaged in some form of organized warfare for roughly 12,000 years of our recorded history. We still haven't achieved complete peace. Know why? Because emotional volatility prevents rational conflict resolution," stated the six-armed council member matter-of-factly. "Wrong," Maria Gonzalez cut in, stepping forward with her engineers. "Confidence. It's because we're really, really good at it. We've had 12,000 years to perfect the art of breaking things and hurting people. We've invented weapons that range from pointed sticks to planet crackers. We've developed strategy and tactics and logistics to levels that turned warfare into a science. You know what drives innovation faster than anything else in human history? War. You know what makes us innovate in warfare? Emotions, fear of losing, anger at injustice, love of our homes and families, grief over our fallen. Every single major leap forward in human military technology was driven by someone feeling something so strongly that they refused to accept defeat." Captain Rodriguez took over, his military bearing now an asset rather than just protocol. "Let me give you a recent example. 73 years ago, the colony world of New Hebrides was attacked by the Crithian raiders. You know the Crithians, right? 4-meter-tall apex predators, natural weapons, hive-minded coordination. They'd been terrorizing the outer colonies for decades, taking what they wanted because no one could stand against them. "We are aware of the Crithian species," Consensus Leader 1 confirmed. "They refused to join the collective. They were eventually contained through diplomatic pressure and resource restrictions." "Right. You contained them through bureaucracy," Rodriguez continued, his voice taking on an edge. "We had a different approach. The Crithians hit New Hebrides expecting easy prey. Soft civilian targets, minimal military presence. What they found were 50,000 colonists who just watched their families get slaughtered. You want to know what angry humans are capable of? Those colonists, most of them with no military training, using improvised weapons and farm equipment, held off a force of 20,000 Crithian warriors for 6 days. 6 days of pure rage-fueled resistance while they waited for relief forces." Ashley pulled up more data. "The collective's records on this incident classify it as an anomaly. Your analysis concluded that the human defensive success was due to favorable terrain and Crithian tactical errors. But that's not what happened. What happened was that those colonists fought with a ferocity born of grief and fury. They set traps not because of logical calculation, but because they were so angry they wanted to make the Crithians suffer. They held positions past the point of military sense because pride wouldn't let them retreat. They coordinated rescue operations for wounded civilians that any rational strategist would have deemed suicide missions. And they won, Marcus added, his academic tone making the words hit harder. Not in spite of their emotions, but because of them. The Crithians, who were driven by cold predatory instinct, couldn't understand or predict what humans would do when pushed to emotional extremes. Every tactical decision the colonists made looked irrational on paper, which is exactly why it worked. Sarah watched the council process this information. Their faces remained impassive, but she'd been in enough negotiations to recognize when the other side was reconsidering their position. It was time to press the advantage. "Let me share another data point," she said, gesturing for David to pull up a new display. "The collective has existed for 50,000 years. In that time, you've encountered and cataloged approximately 8,000 sentient species. Of those, 2,147 have joined the collective through purification, impressive numbers." "Indeed," Consensus Leader 1 agreed. "The collective grows stronger with each addition." Now, let's look at military conflicts involving collective members over that same time frame. The hologram shifted to show incident reports. In 50,000 years, the collective has been directly involved in violent conflict. 12 times, 12 conflicts in 50 millennia. That's remarkable. It really does seem like removing emotions prevents war. "It does," the stone-skinned council member stated. "Except," Sarah continued, her voice hardening, "none of those 12 conflicts were defensive. They were all enforcement actions against species that refused to join the collective. And in every single case, the collective won through overwhelming technological advantage, not tactical superiority. You didn't outfight anyone. You just had bigger guns and the patience to wait them out." Marcus took over the presentation. "Compare that to humanity. We've been spacefaring for only 312 years. In that time, we've been involved in violent conflict with alien species 47 times, 47 conflicts in 3 centuries. We should be dead, right? Emotional, aggressive, irrational humans against species with millions of years of evolution, species with natural weapons and armor, species with technological advantages. We should have been wiped out in the first decade. Yet you endure," Consensus Leader 1 observed. "This is the concern. Your survival despite emotional handicap suggests dangerous unpredictability." "It's not despite our emotions," Sarah said firmly. "It's because of them. Let me tell you about the Battle of Proxima Station, 22 years ago, the Zelthian Imperium. Remember them? Logical, strategic, calculating. They'd conquered 40 star systems through careful planning and superior tactics. When they encountered humanity, they did exactly what you're doing now. They assessed us as primitive emotionals who couldn't possibly stand against their calculated warfare." Ashley pulled up battle footage, 3-dimensional recordings of spacecraft engaged in combat around a massive space station. The Zelthians hit Proxima with a fleet of 200 warships. Proxima Station had a defensive force of 32 human ships. The math said we'd lose in under an hour. The Zelthians' battle computers had calculated a 99.7% probability of total human defeat. "What the computers couldn't calculate," Captain Rodriguez said, watching the footage with eyes that had seen too much combat, "was what happens when you threaten 2 million human civilians." The station's commander, Admiral Patricia Okonkwo, knew she couldn't win through conventional tactics, so she didn't try. Instead, she ordered every single defensive vessel to conduct suicide ramming attacks on the largest Zelthian ships. The council shifted slightly, the first sign of real reaction they'd shown. "That's illogical," one of them stated, "sacrificing vessels with crew for minimal damage exchange." "Minimal," Maria laughed bitterly. "Those 32 ships took down 47 Zelthian warships, each one rammed at relativistic speeds, turning themselves into kinetic weapons. It wasn't efficient. It wasn't clean. It sure as hell wasn't logical. But it was terrifying. The Zelthian computers couldn't process it. Their models couldn't predict commanders who would willingly die to take enemies with them. More importantly, the surviving Zelthian commanders, for all their logic, experienced something they thought they'd evolved past. They felt fear. The Zelthians withdrew, Sarah concluded. They retreated from a battle they were winning because they couldn't understand an enemy that fought with such emotion, with such anger, with such willingness to sacrifice everything. They still had numerical and technological superiority, but they'd encountered something their logical minds couldn't quantify. Humans who cared so much about protecting others that death was preferable to surrender. David brought up another series of charts. Since that battle, the Zelthian Imperium has maintained a strict non-engagement policy with humanity. Not because we're stronger. We're not. Not because we're more advanced. We're not. But because their strategic computers keep reaching the same conclusion. Humans cannot be reliably predicted in combat scenarios. Our emotional responses create variables that cannot be adequately modeled. In their analysis, we're essentially living chaos engines wrapped in meat suits and pointed at problems. And it's not just military conflicts, Marcus added, warming to the topic. Look at our scientific advancement rate. In 312 years of space travel, we've made discoveries that took other species millennia to achieve. Why? Because our scientists get excited about mysteries. They feel joy when they solve problems. They experience curiosity so intense that they'll spend decades pursuing answers to questions that have no immediate practical value. The collective advances through logical, methodical research. Humans advance through scientists being so emotionally invested in their work that they forget to sleep or eat because they're too excited about what they're learning. A new council member spoke for the first time, this one with multiple eyes arranged in spiral patterns. You present emotions as beneficial, yet your own history is filled with atrocities committed in the name of these same feelings, wars fought over insults, genocides driven by hatred, conflicts that destroyed civilizations because individuals could not control their emotional responses. You're absolutely right, Sarah admitted, catching the council off guard with her honesty. Human history is soaked in blood spilled because of anger, hatred, fear, and greed. We've done terrible things, unforgivable things, things that keep us up at night with shame and regret. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. But we also built civilizations driven by love. We created art because of joy and sorrow. We developed medicine because we couldn't bear to watch people suffer. We explore space because of wonder and curiosity. Every human achievement, every moment of beauty, every act of compassion or courage, all of it comes from the same emotional capacity that also enables our worst impulses. Marcus stepped forward again. Here's what you need to understand about humanity. We don't see emotions as a weakness to overcome. We see them as the core of what makes existence meaningful. A universe without pain has no need for courage. A universe without fear has no space for bravery. A universe without sorrow makes joy meaningless. You've achieved perfect peace by removing the capacity to feel anything worth fighting for. That is illogical, Consensus Leader 1 stated. Peace is objectively preferable to conflict. Is it? Captain Rodriguez challenged. Tell me, Consensus Leader, in 50,000 years of existence, what has the collective created that wasn't purely functional? What art have you made? What music have you composed? What stories have you told? What do you do with your time besides exist efficiently? The silence that followed was damning. We maintain galactic stability, the six-armed member finally said. We preserve knowledge. We expand understanding of the physical universe. But do you enjoy it? Maria asked softly. When you make a discovery, do you feel excited? When you solve a problem, do you feel satisfied? When you look at a beautiful nebula or a pristine world, do you feel anything at all? More silence. Ashley pulled up a final data display. Let me show you something that's going to seem like I'm bragging, but I promise it's relevant. This is a comparison of artistic output across species. Music, visual art, literature, performance, all of it. The collective has produced approximately 2,000 artistic works in 50,000 years. Those were all created by member species before their purification. Post-purification artistic output, 0. She highlighted humanity's section. Humans in 312 years of space-age civilization have produced over 4 billion distinct artistic works. 4 billion. And that's just the stuff we bothered to catalog officially. Our civilization is drowning in art because we feel things so intensely that we have to express them or we'll burst. We write songs about heartbreak and joy. We paint pictures of landscapes that move us emotionally. We tell stories about people who never existed because we're trying to process our own feelings about existence. This is inefficient use of resources, one council member observed. It's what makes life worth living, Sarah countered passionately. And for the first time since entering this chamber, she let her own emotions show clearly on her face. Anger, yes, but also sadness for these beings who'd traded away their souls for peace. You exist, you function, you persist. But do you live? When was the last time any of you felt joy so intense it brought tears to your eyes, or sorrow so deep it made you question everything, or love so powerful it made you willing to sacrifice everything for another being? We do not experience such states, Consensus Leader 1 confirmed. They are remnants of primitive neural architecture. They're what makes us alive, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Every species you've purified, you've killed what made them unique. You've turned them into organic machines, processing information and performing tasks. You call it enlightenment. We call it lobotomy. The council was silent for a long moment. When Consensus Leader 1 spoke again, its tone hadn't changed, but something about the words felt different. You make impassioned arguments for emotional preservation. However, you have not addressed the fundamental concern. Emotional volatility leads to conflict. Your own examples prove this. Anger makes you dangerous. Fear makes you desperate. You acknowledge this, yet defend it. Sarah nodded slowly. You're right that emotions make us dangerous. But here's what you're missing. Emotions don't just make us dangerous to others. They make us dangerous to ourselves. They push us to exceed our limits, to sacrifice for others, to fight when logic says surrender. You see that as a flaw. We see it as our greatest strength, she gestured to her team. Every person here has, at some point, done something illogical because they felt it was right. Captain Rodriguez has stayed on a sinking ship to help evacuate others when cold calculation said he should save himself. Lieutenant Commander Park has taken command of damaged vessels and refused evacuation orders because anger at the enemy made her determined to keep fighting. Dr. Webb has spent 20 years studying alien psychology not for fame or money, but because he's genuinely curious and excited about understanding other minds. Engineer Gonzalez has pulled off miracles of improvised repairs because she loves these ships and can't stand to see them damaged. And you, Ambassador? Consensus Leader 1 asked. What illogical action have you taken? Sarah smiled sadly. I watched my daughter die of a disease we didn't have a cure for. I felt grief so profound that I couldn't function for months. And when I finally pulled myself together, I dedicated my life to making sure other parents wouldn't experience that pain. I helped establish the Interstellar Medical Research Initiative, which has saved millions of lives across multiple species. That's not logic. That's grief and anger and love all mixed together, driving me to do something that matters. She took a deep breath. So here's humanity's answer to your ultimatum. We refuse both options. We will not undergo purification, and we will not accept quarantine. We'll continue exploring, making friends, forming alliances, and yes, occasionally fighting when we have to. We'll keep feeling, keep creating, keep being beautifully and dangerously human. That is not acceptable, Consensus Leader 1 stated, though without heat. You cannot simply refuse the parameters of the choice. Watch us, Ashley said with a grin that would have made a shark proud. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his military bearing suddenly very present. Here's the thing about emotional humans. You threaten us, we get angry. You try to contain us, we get creative. You try to force us into boxes, we break out and burn the boxes down. You've maintained your galactic order for 50,000 years through overwhelming force and patience, but you've never encountered a species quite like us. You would fight the collective? The spiral-eyed council member sounded almost curious. Your technology is millennia behind ours. Your fleets are tiny compared to our forces. Logic dictates you would lose. Probably, Maria admitted cheerfully. But here's the beautiful thing about fighting angry humans. We don't fight fair. We cheat. We improvise. We do things that look completely insane because they are, but they work anyway. And even if you won, you'd be fighting an enemy that gets more dangerous the more you push them. David pulled up his final piece of data. I've been analyzing the collective's expansion patterns. Very methodical, very logical. You encounter a species, assess them, offer purification or containment. They usually choose purification because the alternative is slow death through isolation. But here's what I noticed. You've never fought a prolonged conflict with an emotional species. Every enforcement action in your history has been against species that tried to fight you rationally, species that made logical calculations about acceptable losses and strategic value. He highlighted several data points. Humans don't fight like that. We've won wars we had no business winning because we refused to accept defeat. We've held positions that should have fallen in hours because pride wouldn't let us retreat. We've launched counterattacks that looked suicidal because anger overrode survival instinct. Your battle computers can't model that. Your strategic planning can't account for enemies who make decisions based on feelings rather than calculations. You're essentially threatening us, Consensus Leader 1 observed without emotion. You're stating that if we enforce quarantine, you will respond with violence. We're stating, Sarah corrected, that we will not accept being caged. What happens after that is up to you. You can try to contain us and deal with the consequences, or you can do something the collective hasn't done in a very long time. Compromise. The collective does not compromise, the six-armed member stated flatly. Compromise is a logical merging of incompatible positions. Then maybe it's time to learn, Marcus suggested. Look, we understand your concerns. You've built a peaceful, stable civilization by removing the variables that cause conflict. That works for you. But it doesn't have to work for everyone. What if humanity remained outside the collective but agreed to certain restrictions? No military expansion beyond certain zones, regular diplomatic check-ins, maybe even some technology sharing? A middle path, Consensus Leader 1 said slowly, as if testing out a foreign concept. You propose coexistence without integration. Exactly, Sarah jumped on the opening. You don't have to purify us to work with us. You don't have to contain us to maintain your peace. We're emotional, sure, but we're not mindless berserkers. We can follow agreements, honor treaties, maintain diplomatic relations. We just need to do it while remaining ourselves. The council was silent for what felt like an eternity. The humans waited, tension building as seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, Consensus Leader 1 spoke. The collective will deliberate on this proposal. You will return to your vessel and await our decision. This is unprecedented, and precedent must be carefully established. As the human delegation was escorted back to their ship, Ashley leaned close to Sarah and whispered, "Did we just tell the galaxy's oldest civilization to go to hell?" Sarah smiled slightly. "We told them we're not changing who we are, even if it scares them. That's different." "Is it, though?" Maria muttered, though she was smiling too. Back on the Harmony's Voice, the team collapsed into their respective stations with varying degrees of relief and residual adrenaline. Captain Rodriguez immediately ordered a full systems check and put the ship on quiet alert, just in case the collective decided to make their response violent. "Well," David said, breaking the tense silence, "that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever been part of. Possibly both." "Definitely both," Marcus agreed, pulling off his glasses to clean them with shaking hands. "We just told 50,000 years of accumulated wisdom and power that we know better." "We don't know better," Sarah corrected, sitting down heavily in her command chair. "We just know different. The collective's way works for them. It wouldn't work for us." The hours that followed were excruciating. The team tried to rest, to eat, to do anything but obsessively watch the chronometer counting down toward the collective's response. Sarah spent most of it in her quarters, preparing reports and contingency plans, trying not to think about what would happen if this went wrong. She was in the middle of her fourth cup of coffee when the comm system chimed. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through, tight with tension. "Ambassador, you need to see this. Now." Sarah practically ran to the bridge. The main view screen showed something that made her heart sink. 3 massive collective warships had materialized around the Harmony's voice, each one bristling with weapons that could vaporize their small diplomatic vessel in seconds. "They're hailing us," David reported, his voice carefully neutral. "On screen," Sarah ordered, forcing herself to stand tall, despite the fear racing through her veins. Consensus leader. 1 appeared on the display, and for the first time, Sarah thought she detected something in those dark eyes. Not emotion exactly, but perhaps a ghost of where emotion used to be. Ambassador Chen, the collective has reached a decision regarding humanity's proposal. The pause that followed felt calculated to create maximum tension. Your arguments have been analyzed. Your historical data has been verified. Your emotional responses have been carefully studied. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. Here it comes, she thought. Rejection or acceptance. The future of humanity hanging on the words of beings who couldn't feel the weight of that decision. The collective, Consensus Leader 1 continued, has determined that humanity represents a unique case in our 50,000 years of operation. Your species exhibits paradoxical combinations of traits, emotional volatility coupled with strategic capability, irrational courage combined with practical innovation, aggressive tendencies balanced by cooperation and creativity. We have concluded, another council member added, that humanity cannot be adequately categorized using existing frameworks. You are simultaneously a threat to galactic stability and a potential asset to the greater galactic community. This dichotomy presents a logical impossibility that requires unprecedented response. Oh no, Sarah thought. They're going to come up with some third option we didn't prepare for. But what Consensus Leader 1 said next shocked her to her core. The collective votes to grant humanity limited autonomous status. You will be permitted to maintain your emotional baseline without purification. You will not be subject to quarantine. Instead, you will be placed under probationary observation. You may expand, explore, and interact with other species, but the collective will monitor your activities closely. Should humanity prove capable of maintaining stability while retaining emotional capacity, this arrangement will continue indefinitely. Should your emotional nature lead to significant destabilization, this decision will be reviewed. Sarah realized her mouth was hanging open and snapped it shut. They'd won. Sort of. Maybe. Consensus Leader, what exactly does probationary observation entail? Regular diplomatic meetings, shared intelligence on potential conflicts, technology exchange programs. In effect, humanity will be the first species in collective records to maintain full autonomy while engaging in cooperative partnership with us. You will retain your emotions, your government systems, and your cultural practices. In exchange, you will agree to certain behavioral protocols designed to minimize risk to galactic stability. Captain Rodriguez leaned close to Sarah. That's basically what we proposed, but with a fancy title. She nodded, barely able to believe it. Consensus Leader, on behalf of humanity, we accept these terms. We look forward to a long and productive relationship with the collective. One additional note, Consensus Leader 1 added. The Council has also voted to initiate a comprehensive study of emotional intelligence across species. Your arguments regarding the potential benefits of emotional capacity have raised questions that merit investigation. Several Council members have volunteered to undergo temporary emotional restoration as part of this research. Sarah couldn't help herself. She smiled. Wait, you're going to let yourselves feel again? Temporarily and under controlled conditions, the spiral-eyed member clarified. We are curious to examine whether emotional capacity might have applications we have not considered. This is purely academic research. Right, Ashley whispered. Academic. They're totally not curious about what they have been missing. Maria elbowed her to shut up, but she was grinning too. The transmission ended, and for a moment, the bridge was absolutely silent. Then David let out a whoop that made everyone jump, and suddenly the entire crew was laughing, crying, hugging, and generally engaging in the kind of emotional display that would have made the collective very uncomfortable. We did it, Marcus said, still looking stunned. We actually convinced them. Not convinced, Sarah corrected, wiping tears from her eyes. We showed them something they'd never considered, that emotions aren't just obstacles to overcome, but tools that can be wielded. We're still dangerous, still unpredictable, but now they see that as interesting rather than just threatening. Captain Rodriguez pulled up a bottle of whiskey he'd hidden in his emergency supplies. I know we're on duty, but I'm making an executive decision that this calls for a drink. I'll allow it, Sarah said, accepting a glass. To humanity, the first species crazy enough to tell the galaxy's oldest civilization to reconsider 50,000 years of philosophy. And live to tell about it, Ashley added, raising her glass. They drank, and the whiskey burned going down, warm and real and utterly human.